You've got to feel a bit sorry for Avowed, haven't you? The poor sods turned up to the RPG party just as Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is busy drinking all the booze and chatting up the best looking girls. And sure, these games are not exactly twins. One's medieval realism, the other's high fantasy, but in a month crammed with big RPG releases, it's a proper scrap for your attention. But here's the good news, Avowed ain't just here to make the numbers. It's strutting in, chest out, pint in hand, doing its own thing. And you know what? That might just be exactly what you're looking for, and it might just enter itself into a very niche genre of being an arcade RPG. So stick the kettle on, grab a cuppa, and let's have a look at why Avowed could well be worth your time. Now, full transparency, Xbox slipped me a free PC copy for review. Cheers for that, Microsoft, much appreciated. But as the Cockney Gamer Gang well know by now, just because I didn't drop any cash on it doesn't mean I'll be stroking egos and sugar-coating shites. And let's be honest, that's probably for the best, because my first experience with Avowed was about as smooth as a brick in a washing machine. I actually got my review key over a week ago, all hyped up, ready to dive in, and then bam, game crash, oh look, another bloody game crash, right at the shader compilation screen no less, every single time. Turns out if you're rocking an RTX 40 or 50 series card, you might as well be playing Russian roulette with your launch experience. So days upon days of troubleshooting instead of actually playing the bloody thing. Now I know I'm in the minority here, but still safe to say I started my journey in Avowed in a right foul mood. In Avowed, you're not just some run-of-the-mill adventurer, you're an envoy of the gods, a divine messenger, the chosen one, all that epic bollocks. In the rather basic character creation screen, you also have to slap on some sort of godlike feature onto your mush, and by godlike I don't mean glowing eyes or celestial auras or horns that pierce through your skull. Instead I mean picking what type of cabbage you want stuck to your face. No joke, your divine blessing looks like you've lost a bar fight in a grocery store. Now mercifully you can turn this leafy nonsense off in gameplay, though NPCs will still react to it all, a bland first impression. The story in Avowed though is decent enough, nothing you ain't seen before mind you, it plays it very safe, ticking off every RPG cliche like it's working through a bingo card. As divine messenger of the gods, all powerful and whatnot, they rock up with plans to take over the land of the living, except plot twist, the land of the living's got itself a nasty plague, and not just any plague, oh no, this one turns people into deranged lunatics who attack anything that moves. If you squint hard enough, these people look like the clickers from The Last of Us, but with some extra fantasy seasoning. These plagued folks lose the plot entirely, bears go absolutely ballistic, soldiers start throwing themselves at you like they've just realised they left the oven on back home, and of course in true blockbuster RPG tradition, where do we begin our epic journey? Shipwrecked of course, washed up on a beach, classic. But you know what, as the story trundled along, I actually found myself getting a bit interested. Shocking, I know. Turns out Avowed isn't just about fighting off plague-ridden nutters. It's all got a fair bit to say about political systems, how the world treats outsiders, and of course the classic RPG power fantasy of playing the hero. Now the side quests, well, they're about as inspiring as a soggy biscuit, and no, not the one private schoolboys play with each other. Most of the side quests boil down to the old go to A, find B, bring it back to C routine. Proper fetch quest central. I didn't really give a toss about my character's role in all this, but somehow the plot still had enough intrigue to keep me going. That said, there is one saving grace to these side quests. They force you to explore, and that is where Avowed really starts flexing, because once you step out into its world, the game stops feeling like a series of errands and starts feeling like an actual adventure. And that's because the world of Avowed is dripping with little secrets, proper treasure trove of nooks and crannies, each one tempting you off the beaten path like a dodgy bloke whispering, "Oi mate, fancy a look at something special." You might stumble into a cave system, get proper lost, and if you're lucky, find a chest with a rare item inside instead of some mouldy tap. Maybe you'll dive into an underwater cavern only to get lost in its big hole. Yes, that's what she said. Or you'll wander into a seemingly empty field and realise it's packed with herbs to upgrade your armour. And let's not forget the sights and sounds. Some of them are proper breathtaking, but I'll get into that when we talk graphics. What really grabbed me here though was the depth of the world and how it's very much your playground to explore. Up to this point then, Avowed was doing a decent enough job of getting me hooked in, but the real surprise, the combat, and I ain't joking here, it's probably the most unexpected banger in the whole game. The combat is fast, not that sluggish, clunky nonsense you sometimes get in RPGs where you feel like you're swinging a baguette underwater. No, here you're darting about, bopping around enemies, dodging like you owe them money, and if you do take hits, it hurts. Proper Doom style punishment. So the action's snappy. One minute you're letting arrows fly, the next you're swinging a sword like an absolute lunatic, or if you fancy going full Daniel Radcliffe, you can whip out your wand for some magical mayhem. It's odd to say this, but the best way to describe Avowed is like a crossover between Dishonored and Doom. It's got that same chaotic energy, fast, brutal and relentless, but in a way that feels good. You're not just plodding through the motions, you're in the thick of it, reacting, adapting, carving up enemies like it's your shift at the abattoir. At times this plays more like an arcade game than it does an RPG, and this for me is where Avowed stands different to other games out there. And then there's the other layer on top of combat. You're not just stuck with whatever tat you pick up. Weapons and armour can be upgraded, fine-tuned to your own playstyle. So if you stick with it long enough, you'll be decked out in legendary gear, absolutely wrecking fools. On top of that, you'll unlock abilities as you go, like routing enemies to the spot if you decide the ranger path. Always handy when some berserker's trying to introduce your skull to his axe. And let's not forget your companions. Turns out they're not just there for decoration. They'll jump in with big hits and special abilities of their own, which, fair play, actually makes them useful instead of just being whiny baggage. I will say though, the companion system might become a bit of a nuisance to you if you prefer to explore solo and is dependent on your own playstyle. But the general theme with Avowed, if we're being honest here, is how it plays it safe. Like, yeah, the combat is good, sometimes really good, but it also ends up going through the motions a bit. You start noticing patterns, and not in a clever, I've mastered the system kind of way, more like, oh great, another walking meat sponge. Because that's the real kicker. Enemies in Avowed are absolute damage sponges, sucking up everything you chuck at them like it's a Sasha Grey movie. It's less about tactical finesse and more about just battering them with sheer quantity until they finally decide to keel over. Forget skillful combat. Half the time it feels like you're just chipping away at a boulder with a plastic spoon. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course, if you like those style of games, but I do want to call it out in case those type of games piss you off. And the AI, well, my pedigree chums, it's suspect to put it politely. I've had enemies just sort of stand there proper confused while I filled their faces with arrows, like they're trying to figure out why they've suddenly got a splitting headache. I mean, fair play, sure, if I had 3 bolts sticking out through my nostrils, I'd probably need a minute to process it too. The boss battles, same story really. They're big, they're stompy, but they're simple. They have 1 phase, maybe 2 if the devs were feeling adventurous. No clever mechanic, no real challenge, just more health bars to chew through. It's fun, sure, but it's also a bit thick, like someone dumbed it down just enough to make sure no one got their feelings hurt. And that's the real shame, innit? With a bit more tweaking, tightening up that AI, trim down the health bars, throw in some proper multi-phase boss battles, and Avowed could have gone from solid to spectacular. Instead, it's like a gourmet meal served with a plastic fork. Tasty, but you can't help thinking how much better it could have been. That whole play it safe vibe ain't just in the story or character building, it seeps into the little things too. Take lockpicking for example. Fancy a challenge? Tough luck, mate. Just press a button, the box pops open and away you go. No tension, no skill, like cracking a safe with a bloody post-it note. And don't expect to loot every corpse you come across either. Half the bodies that are sprawled across the landscape might as well be made of cardboard for all the goodies that they've got. Then there's the puzzles. Jesus wept. If they were any more convenient, they would come with step-by-step instructions and a pat on the head. Picture this, a massive thorn bush blocks your path. Oh no, however will you get past? If only there was some rare, highly specific plant that exploded when it hit the ground. Well, f me sideways, everyone. There it is, hanging directly above that thorn bush, like the devs were scared you'd sprain your brain if you had to think for more than 5 seconds. None of this makes Avowed bad, by the way. It's still fun, but it does hammer home the point that the RPG elements have been properly diluted, stripped back and simplified, all to make sure it caters to a wider audience. Less hardcore role-playing adventure, more RPG light with extra action sprinkles. So let's talk graphics, and there's plenty to say here. First off, let's get the obvious out the way. Avowed looks spectacular, like proper lush, but don't start polishing the trophies just yet, because there's more to the story than pretty pixels. A lot of the eye candy comes down to the art style rather than sheer graphical grunt. Wander through towns and cities and you'll spot a ridiculous amount of detail crammed into every scene. Hanging bangers fluttering about, wooden beams with proper worn textures, lampshades giving off a warm glow. It's clear someone at Obsidian was absolutely buzzing to show off their set dressing skills. Same goes for the world itself. Rich vegetation scattered everywhere, rocky crags begging to be climbed, and little environmental details like cracks in stone and weathered cliff faces. And the character models, proper decent. Faces move naturally during dialogue, and the hair rendering is top notch, especially on those hairy beasts. I mean, some of these creatures are rocking better barnets than most blokes down the pub. Combat's no slouch either, particle effects flying everywhere, spells fizzing like fireworks, and even in the world itself you get this stunning aurora effect bleeding through certain types of vegetation. It's the kind of game that makes you stop, snap a screenshot and think, yeah, that would make a cracking desktop wallpaper. But here's the thing, Avowed's beauty is exactly that, like a postcard. Looks stunning from a distance, but scratch that surface and you realise it's only skin deep. For starters, the world doesn't feel alive at all. NPCs just stand there like they're questioning their life choices, frozen in place while the world moves on without them. It's like someone pressed pause on their brains, and this is where a game like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 really puts Avowed to shame. That game had villagers going about their day, living their little simulated lives. Avowed's lot, they're basically mannequins with dialogue options. And whilst we're on realism, let's talk vegetation. Now, I gave Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 a bit of stick for its plants not reacting properly when you waded through them. Minor details, of course, but just the odd little rustling leaf it had, like nature was barely tolerating your presence. But in Avowed, it's even worse. You can stomp through flower beds, crash into bushes, and the greenery doesn't give a shit. It's like you're a ghost floating through a world that's only pretending to exist. Then there's the lighting. I had ray tracing on, maxed out the settings, and meh, I'll be honest, everything feels too light, too washed out, like someone slapped a dodgy Instagram filter over the entire game. Look at the torches, for example. They do give off light, but it's weak, flat, like a dollar store version of atmospheric lighting. Dark areas aren't dark enough, and instead of the torches slicing through shadows with a proper moody glow, everything just gets this weird hazy brightness. Performance wise, Avowed ran rather delightful, but to be fair, my rig's probably not the best benchmark. I've said this before, it's like testing a Ferrari on the Autobahn and saying, yeah, it goes fast. That said, it does run well, smooth, snappy, no major hiccups. Mostly I did notice a bit of pop in here and there, like the game couldn't quite decide when to load stuff properly. 1 minute everything's pristine, the next you got a soldier playing peekaboo with the geometry phasing in and out like he's auditioning for Ghost Hunters. And yeah, I already mentioned those game crashes, proper temper tantrum stuff at launch, but in fairness, since I started this review, Obsidian's already dropped a ginormous 66GB patch. 66 gigs, that's not a patch, lads, that's a bloody second game. Still, credit where it's due, things are much smoother now, and I've got no doubt they'll iron out the rest of this nonsense soon enough. So yeah, Avowed is a beautifully designed world, no doubt, but a world that's all looks and no soul. It's like dating someone stunning, only to realise halfway through dinner they've got the personality of a wet sock. Shame really, because with a bit more life under the hood, Avowed could have been absolutely spectacular. Sound-wise, Avowed is a bit of a mixed bag for me, but let's start with the good stuff because there is plenty to say on it. In combat, the sound effects are punchy and unique. Enemies grunt and growl as they take hits or lunge at you like they've just been told the kebab shop is closing. The spells here are chef's kiss, swooshes, crackles, explosions, magic here. It sounds powerful, like you're actually slinging raw elemental chaos, not just waving a sparkler about like some wand from Wish.com. It fits perfectly with that fast arcadey combat vibe that I mentioned earlier. Proper Dishonored meets Doom energy. Even the little things impress. Footsteps change depending on the surface you're walking on, from the crunch of gravel to the hollow thud of wooden floors, and the ambient noise. Birds are chirping, wind is whistling, little rustles in the background. It all adds a touch of life to a world that, let's be honest, desperately needs it. Musically, it's solid too. These days, big budget games seem to have orchestras on speed dial, and Avowed definitely didn't cheap out. The soundtrack swells and dips depending on the moment, sweeping strings here, moody drums there. It fits the tone perfectly. That said, there's nothing particularly memorable, no standout banger you'll cut yourself humming to while making a cuppa. It's background noise, but good background noise, like fancy hotel lobby music. Now, where Avowed absolutely sucks donkey balls, however, is the voice acting. It's fine, passable, but that's the problem. It's all just a bit meh. The script doesn't help, mind you. Half the dialogue sounds like it was written by someone who's never had an actual conversation. There's no spark, no personality, just words being read out loud. But the biggest miss is that your own character ain't fully voice acted. That's right, no witty retorts, no emotional outbursts, just silent dialogue choices on a screen. After playing something like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, where the protagonist actually sounded like a person, it's hard not to feel shortchanged here. Now, to be fair, not every RPG goes full voiceover on the protagonist, and there are plenty of great games to get by without it. But still, when everything else in Avowed is trying to be all cinematic and immersive, having your character stand there like a mute lemon feels like a proper step back. Avowed then surprised me. It's a game that knows exactly what it wants to be, and it doubles down on its core features. The combat, easily the standout here. For an RPG, it's almost shocking how much focus there is on the action. Snappy, brutal, and ridiculously satisfying. There's something proper cathartic about planting an axe square in the skull of some goblin who thought he could mug you off. But here's the trade-off. The RPG elements watered down, and for a lot of you, that's actually going to be a win. There's no headache-inducing character builder here with 100 stat sliders and perk trees that look like a spider has had a stroke. Avowed keeps it clean, simple, and straightforward. And because of that, it's also a game that plays it safe. It's not breaking new ground, not revolutionising the genre, not pulling some wild look at us, we've reinvented RPG stunt. And you know what? That is totally fine. In a world where every other game demands 100 hours of your life and a second monitor for build guides, it's actually refreshing to have an RPG that's more pick up and play. It's the gaming equivalent of a solid pub pint. Might not be the fanciest thing on the menu, but it goes down easy and leaves you satisfied. So the final score really comes down to personal taste. I like an RPG that's intricate, immersive, and packed with tiny little details that drag me down the rabbit hole. But that's a double-edged sword because it is bloody exhausting. But if you're after something with more thrills, more action, and less of the fluff, Avowed will be right up your street. Until next time, my lovelies, Reggie out.